Hello, guys. Welcome to Psyched Minds. If you have not subscribed yet, do subscribe, like, and share if you like. We are reading Candide by Voltaire, Chapter 2. What became of Candide among the Bulgarians? Candide, driven from terrestrial paradise, walked a long while without knowing where, weeping, raising his eyes to heaven, turning them often towards the most magnificent of castles, which imprisoned the purest of noble young ladies. He lay down to sleep without supper, in the middle of a field between two furrows. The snow fell in large flakes. Next day, Candide, all benumbed, dragged himself towards the neighboring town, which was called Waldburg Hoftrab Hoftrarburg Dickdorf. Having no money, dying of hunger and fatigue, he stopped sorrowfully at the door of an inn. Two men dressed in blue observed him. Comrade, said one, here is a well built young fellow and of proper height. They went up to Candide and very civilly invited him to dinner. Gentlemen, replied Candide with a most engaging modesty, you do me great honor, but I have not wherewithal to pay my share. Oh, sir, said one of the blues to him, people of your appearance and of your merit never pay anything. Are you not 5 feet 5 inches high? Yes, sir, that is my height, answered he, making a low bow. Come, sir, seat yourself. Not only will we pay your reckoning, but we will never suffer such a man as you to want money. Men are only born to assist one another. You are right, said Candide. This is what I was always taught by Mr. Pangloss, and I see plainly that all is for the best. They begged of him to accept a few crowns. He took them and wished to give them his note. They refused. They sealed themselves at table. Love you not deeply? Oh, yes, answered he. I deeply love Miss Cunegonde. No, said one of the gentlemen. We ask you if you do not deeply love the king of the Bulgarians. Not at all, said he, for I have never seen him. What? He is the best of kings, and we must drink his health. Oh, very willingly, gentlemen. And he drank. That is enough, they tell him. Now you are the help, the support, the defender, the hero of the Bulgarian. Your fortune is made, and your glory is assured. Instantly they fettered him and carried him away to the regiment. There he was made to wheel about to the right and to the left, to draw his rammer, to return his rammer, to present, to fire, to march, and they gave him 30 blows with a cudgel. The next day he did his exercise a little less badly, and he received but 20 blows. The day following they gave him only 10, and he was regarded by his comrade as a prodigy. Candide, all stupefied, could not yet very well realize how he was a hero. He resolved one fine day in spring to go for a walk, marching straight before him, believing that it was a privilege of the human as well as of the animal species to make use of their legs as they pleased. He had advanced 2 leagues when he was overtaken by 4 others, heroes of 6 feet, who bound him and carried him to a dungeon. He was asked which he would like the best, to be whipped 6 and 30 times through all the regiment, or to receive at once 12 balls of lead in his brain. 12 balls of lead in his brain. He vainly said that human's will is free and that he chose neither the one nor the other. He was forced to make a choice. He determined, in virtue of that gift of God called liberty, to run the gauntlet 6 and 30 times. He bore this twice. This regiment was composed of 2,000 men that composed for him 4,000 strokes, which laid bare all his muscles and nerves, from the nape of his neck quite down to his rump. As they were going to proceed to a third whipping, Candide, able to bear no more, begged as a favour that they would be so good as to shoot him. He obtained his favour. They bandaged his eye and bade him kneel down. The king of the Bulgarian passed at this moment and ascertained the nature of the crime. As he had great talent, he understood from all that he learned of Candide that he was a young metaphysician, extremely ignorant of the things of this world, and he accorded him his pardon with a clemency which will bring him praise in all the journals and throughout all ages. An able surgeon cured Candide in 3 weeks by means of emollients taught by Dioscorides. He had already a little skin and was able to march when the king of the Bulgarian gave battle to the king of the Abers. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3, how Candide made his escape from the Bulgarians and what afterwards became of him. There was never anything so gallant, so spruce, so brilliant, and so well disposed as the two armies. Trumpets, fifes, hautboys, drums, and cannon made music such as hell itself had never heard. The cannons first of all laid flat about 6,000 men on each side. The muskets swept away from this best of worlds, 9 or 10,000 ruffians, which who infested its surface. The bayonet was also a sufficient reason for the death of several thousands. The whole might amount to 30,000 souls. Candide, who trembled like a philosopher, hid himself as well as he could during this heroic butchery. At length, while the two kings were causing Te Deum to be sung each in his own camp, Candide resolved to go and reason elsewhere on effect and causes. He passed over heaps of dead and dying and first reached a neighboring village. It was in cinders. It was a bare village which the Bulgarians had burnt according to the laws of war. Here old men covered with wounds beheld their wives, hugging their children to their bloody breasts, massacred before their faces. There their daughters disemboweled and breathing their last after having satisfied the natural wants of Bulgarian heroes, while others, half burned in the flames, begged to be dispatched. The earth was strewed with brains, arms, and legs. Candide fled quickly to another village. It belonged to the Bulgarians, and the Iberian heroes had treated it in the same way. Candide, walking always over palpitating limbs or across ruins, arrived at last beyond the seat of war, with a few provisions in his knapsack and Miss Cunegonde always in his heart. His provisions failed him when he arrived in Holland, but having heard that everybody was rich in that country and that they were Christians, he did not doubt but he should meet with the same treatment from them as he had met in the Baron's castle, before Miss Cunegonde's bright eyes were the cause of his expulsion thence. He asked alms of several grave looking people, who all answered him that if he continued to follow this trade, they would confine him to the house of correction, where he should be taught to get a living. The next he addressed was a man who had been haranguing a large assembly for a whole hour on the subject of charity. But the orator, looking askew, said, "What are you doing here? Are you for the good cause?" "There can be no effect without a cause," modestly answered Candide. "The whole is necessarily concatenated and arranged for the best. It was necessary for me to have been banished from the presence of Miss Cunegonde to have afterwards run the gauntlet, and now it is necessary I should beg my bread until I learn to earn it. All this cannot be otherwise." "My friend," said the orator to him, "do you believe the Pope to be Antichrist?" "I have not heard it," answered Candide, "but whether he be or whether he be not, I want bread." "Thou dost not deserve to eat," said the other. "Begone, rogue, begone, wretch, do not come near me again." The orator's wife, putting her head out of the window and spying a man that doubted whether the Pope was Antichrist, poured over him a full, O heavens! To what excess does religious zeal carry the ladies? A man who had never been Christian, a good Anabaptist named James, beheld the cruel and ignominious treatment shown to me of his brethren, shown to one of his brethren, an unfeathered piped with a rational soul. He took him home, cleaned him, gave him bread and beer, presented him with 2 florins, and even wished to teach him the manufacture of Persian stuff which they make in Holland. Candide, almost prostrating himself before him, cried, Master Pangloss has well said that all is for the best in this world, for I am infinitely more touched by your extreme generosity than with the inhumanity of that gentleman in that black coat and his lady. The next day, as he took a walk, he met a beggar all covered with scabs, his eyes diseased, the end of his nose eaten away, his mouth distorted, his teeth black, choking in his throat, tormented with a violent cough and spitting out a tooth at each effort. That brings us to chapter 3 end. Chapter 4, how Candide found his old master Pangloss and what happened to them. Candide, yet more moved with compassion than with the horror, gave to this shocking beggar the 2 florins which he had received from the honest Anabaptist James. The spectre looked at him very earnestly, dropped a few tears, and fell upon his neck. Candide recoiled in disgust. Alas, said one wretched to the other, do you no longer know your dear Pangloss? What do I hear? You, my dear master, you in this terrible plight? What misfortune has happened to you? Why are you no longer in the most magnificent of castles? What has become of Miss Cunegonde, the pearl of girls, and nature's masterpiece? I am so weak that I cannot stand, said Pangloss. Upon which Candide carried him to the Anabaptist's stable and gave him a crust of bread. As soon as Pangloss had refreshed himself a little, well, said Candide, Cunegonde? She is dead, replied the other. Candide fainted at this word. His friend recalled his senses with a little bad vinegar which he found by the chance in the stable. Candide reopened his eyes. Cunegonde is dead. Ah, best of worlds, where art thou? But of what illness did she die? Was it not for grief upon seeing her father kick me out of his magnificent castle? No, said Pangloss. She was ripped open by the Bulgarian soldiers after having been violated by many. They broke the Baron's head for attempting to defend her. My lady, her mother, was cut in pieces. My poor pupil was served just in the same manner as in his sister. And as for the castle, they have not left one stone upon another, not a barn, not a sheep, nor a duck, nor a tree. But we have had our revenge, for the Abers have done the very same thing to a neighboring barony, which belonged to a Bulgarian lord. At this discourse, Candide fainted again, but coming to himself, and having said all that it became him to say, inquired into the cause and effect as well as into the sufficient reason that had reduced Pangloss to so miserable a plight. Alas, said the other, it was love. Love, the comfort of the human species, the preserver of the universe, the soul of all sensible beings. Love, tender love. Alas, said Candide, I know this love, that sovereign of hearts, that soul of our souls, yet it never cost me more than a kiss and 20 kicks on the backside. How could this beautiful cause produce in you an effect so abominable? Pangloss made answer in these terms. Oh, my dear Candide, you remember Paquette, that pretty wench who waited on your noble Baroness? In her arm I tasted the delight of paradise, which produced in me those hell torments with which you see me devoured. She was infected with them. She is perhaps dead of them. This present Paquette, received of a learned grey friar who had traced it to its source. It had it of an old country countess who had received it from a cavalry captain who owed it to a Marchioness, who took it from a page, who had received it from a Jesuit, who, when a novice, had it in a direct line from one of the companions of Christopher Columbus. For my part, I shall give it to nobody. I am dying. Oh, Pangloss, cried Candide, what a strange genealogy! Is not the devil the original stock of it? Not at all, replied this great man. It was a thing unavoidable, unnecessary ingredient in the best of worlds. For if Columbus had not in an island of America caught this disease, which contaminates the source of life, frequently even hinders generation, and which is evidently opposed to the great end of nature, we should have neither chocolate nor cochineal. We are also to observe that upon our continent this distemper is like religious controversy, confined to a particular spot. The Turks, the Indian, the Persians, the Chinese, the Siamese, the Japanese know nothing of it. But there is a sufficient reason for believing that they will know it in their turn in a few centuries. In the meantime, it has made marvelous progress among us, especially in those great armies composed of honest, well disciplined hirelings, who decide the destiny of states. For we may safely affirm that when an army of 30,000 men fights another of an equal number, there are about 20,000 of them PXD on each side. Well, this is wonderful, said Candide, but you must get cured. Alas, how can I? Said Pangloss. I have not a farthing, my friend, and all over the globe there is no letting of blood or taking a glycerin without paying or somebody paying for you. These last words determined Candide. He went and flung himself at the feet of the charitable Anabaptist James and gave him so touching a picture of the state to which his friend was reduced that the good man did not scruple to take Dr. Pangloss into his house, and had him cured at his expense. In the cure, Pangloss lost only an eye and an ear. He wrote well and knew arithmetic perfectly. The Anabaptist James made him his bookkeeper. At the end of 2 months, being obliged to go to Lisbon about some mercantile affair, he took the two philosophers with him in his ship. Pangloss explained to him how everything was so constituted that it could not be better. James was not of this opinion. It is more likely, said he, mankind have a little corrupted nature, for they were not born wolves, and they have become wolves. God has given them neither cannon of 4 and 20 pounders nor bayonets, and yet they have made cannons and bayonets to destroy one another. Into this account I might throw not only bankrupts, but this justice, which seizes on the effect of bankrupts to cheat the creditors. All this was indispensable, replied the one eyed doctor. For private misfortunes make the general good, so that the more private misfortunes there are, the greater is the general good. While he reasoned, the sky darkened. The winds blew from the four quarters, and the ship was assailed by a most terrible tempest within sight of the port of Lisbon. That brings us to the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Tempest, shipwreck, earthquake, and what became of Dr. Pangloss, Candide, and James the Anabaptist. Half dead of that inconceivable anguish which the rolling of a ship produces, one half of the passengers were not even sensible of the danger. The other half shrieked and prayed. The sheets were rent, the mast broken, the vessel gaped. Work who would, no one heard, no one commanded. The Anabaptist, being upon deck, bore a hand when a brutish sailor struck him roughly and laid him sprawling. But with the violence of the blow, he himself tumbled head foremost overboard and stuck upon a piece of the broken mast. Honest James ran to his assistance, hauled him up, and from the effort he made was precipitated into the sea in the side of the sailor, who left him to perish without deigning to look at him. Candide drew near and saw his benefactor, who rose above the water one moment and was then swallowed up for ever. He was just going to jump after him, but was prevented by the philosopher Pangloss, who demonstrated to him that the Bay of Lisbon had been made on purpose for the Anabaptist to be drowned. While he was proving this a priori, the ship foundered. All perished except Pangloss, Candide, and that brutal sailor who had drowned the good Anabaptist. The villains swam safely to the shore, while Pangloss and Candide were borne thither upon a plank. As soon as they recovered themselves a little, they walked towards Lisbon. They had some money left with which they hoped to save themselves from starving after they had escaped drowning. Scarcely had they reached the city, lamenting the death of their benefactor, when they felt the earth tremble under their feet. The sea swelled and formed in the harbor and beat to pieces the vessels riding at the anchor. Whirlwinds of fire and ashes covered the street and public places. Houses fell, roofs were flung upon the pavement, and the pavements were scattered. 30,000 inhabitants of all ages and sexes were crushed under the ruins. The sailor, whistling and swearing, said there were booty to be gained here. What can be the sufficient reason of this phenomena? Said Pangloss. This is the last day, cried Candide. The sailor ran among the ruins, facing death to find money. Finding it, he took it, got drunk, and having slept himself sober, purchased the favours of the first good-natured wench whom he met on the ruins of the destroyed houses, and in the midst of the dying and the dead, Pangloss pulled him by the sleeve. My friend, said he, this is not right. You sin against the universal reason. You choose your time badly. Blood and fury, answered the other. I am a sailor and born at Batavia. 4 times have I trampled upon the crucifix in 4 voyages to Japan. A fig for thy universal reason. Some failing stones had wounded Candide. He lay stretched in the street covered with rubbish. Alas, said he to Pangloss, get me a little wine and oil, I am dying. This concussion of the earth is no new thing, answered Pangloss. The city of Lima, in America, experienced the same convulsions last year. The same cause, the same effects. There is certainly a train of sulphur underground from Lima to Lisbon. Nothing more probable, said Candide. But for the love of God, a little oil and wine. How probable? Replied the philosopher. I maintain that the point is capable of being demonstrated. Candide fainted away, and Pangloss fetched him some water from a neighbouring fountain. The following day they rummaged among the ruins and found provisions with which they repaired their exhausted strength. After this they joined with others in relieving those inhabitants who had escaped death. Some whom they had succored gave them as good a dinner as they could in such disastrous circumstances. True, the repast was mournful, and the company moistened their bread with tears, but Pangloss consoled them, assured them that things could not be otherwise. For, said he, all that is for the best. If there is a volcano at Lisbon, it cannot be elsewhere. It is impossible that things should be other than they are, for everything is right. A little man dressed in black, familiar of the Inquisition who sat by him, politely took up his word and said, Apparently, then, sir, you do not believe in original sin, for if all is for the best, there has then been neither fall nor punishment. I humbly ask your Excellency's pardon, answered Pangloss, still more politely. For the fall and curse of men necessarily entered into the system of the best of the worlds. Sir, said the familiar, you do not then believe in liberty. Your Excellency will excuse me, said Pangloss. Liberty is consistent with absolute necessity, for it was necessary we should be free. For in short, the determinate will. Pangloss was in the middle of his sentence when the familiar beckoned to his footman, who gave him a glass of wine from Porto or Oporto. That brings us to the end of chapter 5. We will continue with chapter 6 in our next reading, which will be tomorrow. If you have any comments on the content we just read or otherwise on the other videos that are already done reading, you can reach out in the comment section of the video. If you have any suggestions, recommendations, feedback, criticism, or anything at all, you can reach out in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section of the YouTube channel. Bye bye for now. Take care. Keep reading. Bye.